He strode toward the War Memorial in Arlington with a confident swagger, phone held high, live streaming every step. Thousands of viewers watched in real time as he boasted about how cool it would be to push the limits with the Marines standing guard. What none of them expected was how a single moment of defiance would turn into a lesson no one would ever forget. Before we dive into this gripping tale, take a moment to comment below and let us know from which city or state you're watching. Your feedback fuels stories like this and helps us bring you even more fascinating content. Arlington, Virginia. The sky was a brilliant cloudless blue, and the temperature hovered around a mild 75 degrees. The sun cast a warm glow over the perfectly manicured grounds, illuminating the Marine Corps War Memorial's iconic depiction of servicemen raising the American flag at Iwo Jima. Tourists moved respectfully among the historical monuments, drawn by the sheer significance of this hallowed location. Many paused to reflect on the sacrifices symbolized by each meticulously engraved name and date. Some quietly snapped photos, while others stood still in silent admiration. Against this poignant backdrop, a lone Marine stood at ceremonial attention. His posture was flawless, shoulders squared, chin lifted. Every inch of his uniform was pressed and precise, from his immaculate white cover to the polished shoes that gleamed in the sunlight. This was Lance Corporal Jeremy Ross, a disciplined member of the United States Marine Corps. Having served 2 years overseas in various training deployments, Ross possessed a quiet confidence and a profound respect for the traditions of the Corps. He had been chosen to guard this memorial because of his unwavering professionalism and sense of duty, qualities that had become second nature to him. Visitors frequently found themselves both comforted and humbled by his presence. Some whispered in awe, acknowledging how young he looked, yet how entirely poised and serious he appeared. Parents would point him out to their children and speak of honor, courage, and commitment, core values every Marine is expected to uphold. It was no ordinary post. Ross knew that for countless families, this monument was more than just an image of the past. It was a testament to the bravery and sacrifice upon which the nation was built. On most days, Lance Corporal Ross merely had to offer a polite nod or a calm but firm reminder for people to maintain decorum. Tourists, veterans, and curious bystanders alike would respond with respect. Even if some approached with questions, they did so quietly. Yet in the era of viral content, it was only a matter of time before someone tried to create a spectacle. Today, that someone was about to appear in the form of an overconfident influencer seeking his next big moment. The influencer in question was Derek Blake, a social media sensation who had carved his niche by performing outrageous stunts and filming pranks that towed the line of decency. He had arrived at Arlington in a flashy sports car, streaming to his followers about how he planned to test the boundaries of a Marine Guard's patience. In his view, sensational and sometimes disrespectful content equaled greater online engagement. His signature grin was plastered across his face as he sauntered past rows of silent onlookers. Sporting designer sunglasses and wearing a shirt emblazoned with his personal logo, Derek made little effort to fit the solemn atmosphere. "All right, guys," Derek said to the camera, his voice practically echoing around the memorial grounds. "I've heard these Marines never move, never talk, unless you do something crazy. Let's see if that's true or just a myth, shall we?" He flashed a mischievous wink and gestured around, amplifying his voice for the live audience. "We're about to find out how far I can push this situation without getting in trouble." Some of the bystanders nearby heard Derek and exchanged concerned glances. A few even approached him, politely advising, "You should show respect. This area is sacred." One older gentleman, a veteran himself, quietly remarked, "Son, you don't want to do that. This monument is about people who gave their lives for the country. You should be mindful." Derek, however, shrugged off the warnings with a dismissive wave of his hand. The camera was rolling, and he was determined to give his fans a spectacle. Every passing second, more viewers flocked to his stream, dropping comments of either excitement or caution. Meanwhile, Lance Corporal Ross remained statuesque, fully aware of the commotion unfolding nearby. From the corner of his eye, he could see Derek's approach, phone in hand, brazenly stepping closer to the rope barrier that separated the memorial's guarded space from the public walkway. Ross had been trained to stay composed under pressure, to maintain a stoic presence no matter who tried to provoke him. His instructions were clear: protect the integrity of the memorial, uphold the honor of the Corps, and ensure that no individual disrupted the solemn nature of the site. Derek halted just a few feet away, leaning in to zoom his phone camera on Ross's face. The Marine's jaw remained tight, eyes staring straight ahead with unwavering discipline. Derek chuckled into his microphone. "See this guy? Like a statue, I tell you. Come on, buddy, give us a smile. Don't they teach you any customer service in boot camp?" A small crowd began forming. Families who had come to pay their respects or simply learn more about American history shifted uncomfortably. Some people whispered in protest, while others looked expectantly at the Marine to see if he would respond. Children clung to their parents, uncertain about what was happening. Ross could sense the tension rising. His training reminded him that any unauthorized breach of the restricted area required a measured yet firm response. Yet he also knew that some individuals simply sought a reaction, hoping to capture a dramatic moment on film. He silently resolved not to be baited into an unprofessional exchange. Every nerve in his body was on alert, but externally he remained the embodiment of composure. Derek, feeling emboldened by the Marine's silence, decided to escalate. He brought his face closer, contorting his features into a mocking grin. "Is that all you do? Stand there looking serious?" he sneered, tossing a glance at his camera as if waiting for the stream chat to egg him on. Indeed, the chat was in an uproar. Some viewers were thrilled by Derek's audacity, while others pleaded with him to stop. Encouraged by the surge in viewership, Derek took a half step forward, practically crossing into the restricted zone. At this point, you could sense the anxiety ripple through the onlookers. A few people tried to step in and caution Derek again, reminding him, "Hey, you can't cross that line, show some respect." But he waved them off with a dramatic flourish. "Relax," he announced. "This is just for entertainment. You'll thank me when it goes viral." His voice, brimming with arrogance, echoed in the solemn space. The Marine's stance didn't waver, but his eyes flicked momentarily toward the boundary Derek was about to breach. Lance Corporal Ross's heart pounded steadily, though not from fear. He felt a surge of protective instinct. An intangible line had been crossed, and he readied himself to fulfill his duty. Still, protocol dictated that he wait until the situation clearly demanded action. Diplomacy first, force only if absolutely necessary. Steadily, Derek raised his phone higher, making sure the viewers got an up-close shot of Ross's stoic face. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced with theatrical flair, "I am standing right in front of a Marine who's basically a human statue. Let's see if he can hold his pose when I do this." With that, Derek made a subtle lunge as if to see if the Marine would flinch. The crowd collectively held its breath. A hush fell over the memorial grounds, broken only by the faint rustling of leaves in a gentle breeze. A couple of children peered anxiously from behind their parents, eyes wide with both curiosity and concern. The memorial's timeless energy seemed to momentarily stand still, as if it too awaited the Marine's response. And yet, Lance Corporal Ross did not move an inch. He maintained his stance, mentally reminding himself of the strict standards he had vowed to uphold. Derek blinked, taken aback by the Marine's unshakable poise. For a fleeting second, uncertainty flickered in the influencer's eyes, as if he began to realize he might be in over his head. However, he quickly dismissed the thought, turning back to his phone camera with a triumphant grin. "There you have it, folks," he crowed. "He's not gonna do anything. It's all just for show, right?" Somewhere in the crowd, a quiet voice murmured, "You're making a mistake." Another individual, a middle-aged woman who had been silently observing, whispered under her breath, "He has no idea what he's dealing with." But Derek, fully immersed in his live audience and the promise of online clout, paid them no mind. His entire focus was on driving up the drama, which he believed would translate into likes, shares, and new subscribers. Little did he know, he was walking an increasingly thin line, a line that, if crossed too far, could have serious consequences. Despite the Marine's firm composure, the tension was palpable. The more Derek prodded and postured, the more onlookers worried that the influencer would commit a larger violation of the memorial's sanctity. Cameras from other spectators were now aimed at Derek as well. After all, any confrontation at a place of such national importance was bound to capture attention. Yet the Marine still held his silence and refused to break form, his eyes trained forward as though looking through Derek rather than at him. Derek decided he needed to up the ante once more. After all, a viral moment needed something truly shocking. He feigned a bored yawn, rolling his eyes theatrically. "Guys, this is kinda dull," he spoke into his phone. "Let's see if we can get some real action here." With that, he inched a bit closer, edging right up to the rope barrier. A security sign clearly indicated, "Restricted area, do not cross." But Derek seemed to interpret it as a personal challenge rather than a warning. A wave of apprehension coursed through the crowd. Several people gasped audibly. Even those who had been filming the fiasco began to feel that Derek was going too far. Someone pleaded, "Don't cross that line." Another voice chimed in, "You're being disrespectful, not just to him, but to everyone who served." Yet Derek, locking eyes with his phone camera, smirked and said, "What's the worst that could happen, right?" Everyone was about to find out. Derek Blake stood with one foot braced just behind the rope barrier, phone aloft, broadcasting his every word to a swelling audience of online viewers. In the background, the Marine Corps War Memorial towered as a timeless symbol of sacrifice, evoking reverence and national pride. Yet none of that seemed to matter to Derek, who was fixated solely on crafting his next viral moment. He leaned in closer to Lance Corporal Jeremy Ross, still motionless and poised, as though searching for a single twitch or flinch that might bring his livestream to a triumphant crescendo. Meanwhile, a group of elderly veterans gathered off to one side, their faces etched with disapproval. A couple of them whispered urgent pleas for Derek to back off. Families who'd come for an afternoon of respectful reflection exchanged anxious looks, unsure whether to confront the influencer or step aside for fear of escalating the situation further. Derek, emboldened by the rising number of comments flooding his stream, decided to push his luck. With a theatrical sweep of his arm, he pointed to the sign that read, "Restricted area, do not cross." He glanced at his camera with a devilish grin. "Looks like they're asking for trouble, don't you think?" he quipped, his smug tone reverberating throughout the solemn space. He shifted slightly, edging his sneaker beneath the rope barrier. The onlookers gasped, alarmed that he was actively violating the rules. Nearby, a security officer posted at a distant checkpoint took notice and began to move closer, sensing that Derek was teetering on the edge of crossing a line no one should. Lance Corporal Ross remained at attention, but inside he was scanning every detail: Derek's movements, the placement of the rope, the shifting crowd. Though the Marine's stoic stance never broke, his mind raced through the training protocol. He remembered the countless hours spent rehearsing the appropriate responses to breaches in restricted zones. If Derek actually crossed that rope, Ross would be obligated to act swiftly, yet also proportionately. The Marine ethos demanded professionalism, even under extreme provocation. Derek took a dramatic step forward, finally placing himself inside the restricted zone. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. For the first time, a stern voice rang out from behind the crowd. "Hey, you can't do that! Show some respect!" Another person called, "Stop right now! You're going too far!" Yet Derek, thrilled by the adrenaline rush of the moment, ignored them all. He leaned his face mere inches from Ross's unwavering gaze. "Got anything to say now, Marine?" Derek taunted, his voice dripping with condescension. He pivoted the camera back to himself. "Look, guys, he still won't say a word." Some of his followers egged him on in the livestream chat, posting messages like, "Keep going," or "Make him move." Others pleaded with him to stop immediately. Ross's heart pounded, but the training ingrained into his very core prevailed. Even as Derek invaded his personal space, the Marine maintained his disciplined posture, aware that a single impulsive move could jeopardize the integrity of his uniform and the sanctity of the memorial. Yet he also felt a surge of protective duty. This site was sacred ground, and Derek was trampling on its sanctity. There was a limit to how long the Marine could allow this to continue before carrying out his obligations. At last, Derek decided to provoke a direct reaction. He reached out his free hand, hovering it near Ross's meticulously polished uniform jacket. A chorus of warnings and protests rose from the spectators. An elderly woman, wiping tears from her eyes, implored him to respect the fallen heroes honored by the memorial. A father shielded his young daughter from the scene, while a few individuals threatened to call the authorities. Still, Derek's eyes gleamed with a reckless determination. He was fully immersed in his quest for that golden, share-worthy clip. Before Derek could make contact, a clear, authoritative voice cut through the tense atmosphere. "Sir, remove your hand and step back from the rope." It wasn't Lance Corporal Ross who had spoken, but rather another Marine on duty that day, Sergeant Timothy Rivers, who had quietly approached from a side entrance. Sergeant Rivers had 8 years of experience and a keen awareness of public disruptions. He stood a short distance away, posture equally rigid, one hand raised in a firm but non-threatening gesture. This sudden command jolted Derek. For a second he froze, glancing between Rivers and his camera. The silence among the spectators was deafening, as though everyone present was holding their breath. Derek's bravado wavered, then quickly resurged. He turned his phone toward Sergeant Rivers, capturing the imposing figure in uniform. "Now we're talking," Derek said with an exaggerated laugh. "Finally, some actual drama for the viewers." Sergeant Rivers maintained his calm. "Sir," he repeated, "please step away from the restricted area. This memorial is hallowed ground, and you are disrespecting both it and the individuals who serve this country." His voice, while firm, carried neither anger nor harshness. It was simply authoritative, unmistakably serious, yet still measured. Derek feigned an apologetic shrug and turned to his audience. "Sorry, folks, guess I'm in trouble." Then he locked eyes with Sergeant Rivers once more, his arrogance creeping back. "But see, I'm not really hurting anything," he said, stepping still further past the rope to emphasize his point. "Nobody's getting hurt. No property is being damaged. Why don't you lighten up?" A growing number of bystanders now had their phones out, documenting every second. Some demanded Derek stop, while others stared on in tense fascination. The entire area buzzed with a sense of impending confrontation. A few children began to cry softly, overwhelmed by the anger in the air. Veterans looked on with a mixture of disappointment and alarm. Sergeant Rivers glanced over at Lance Corporal Ross, whose stance had not changed in the slightest. Ross's eyes, though forward-facing, were alert, ready to act the moment Rivers gave him any signal. Rivers turned back to Derek. "I'm warning you, sir. Your actions here are in violation of the guidelines set to protect this memorial. If you continue, we will have to remove you from the premises." Derek's live stream chat exploded with messages, half of them urging him to keep pushing, the other half telling him to stop before it was too late. Derek smirked at his phone. So many comments, so little time, he quipped. But the show must go on. He deliberately reached out his hand once again, aiming to tap the brim of Lance Corporal Ross's white cover. That was the final straw. The hush that fell over the gathering was almost suffocating, as though the very air held its breath in anticipation of what would follow. The instant Derek's fingertips grazed the edge of Ross's cover, the Marine sprang into disciplined action. Ross executed a crisp pivot, stepping back just enough to maintain control. In a swift, well-rehearsed movement, he brought his left hand up in a blocking gesture, redirecting Derek's reach without striking him. At the same time, Sergeant Rivers advanced, his voice resonating with unmistakable command. "Stand down, sir. Step away immediately." A jolt of shock rippled through Derek, erasing his smirk for the first time. The crowd erupted in simultaneous exclamations, some of relief, others of worry. A teenage boy gasped, "Oh man, he touched the Marine!" While a mother hurried her children away, sensing that the situation might escalate further. Derek stumbled back a step, caught off guard by the precision of Ross's movement. In his eyes, the possibility of an actual confrontation had seemed remote, until it happened in a flash. The influencer opened his mouth, as though about to hurl an insult, but found himself lost for words. His camera trembled slightly, the feed capturing his unsteady breath. For a fleeting moment, he seemed genuinely unsure of his next move. Sergeant Rivers seized that moment, placing himself between Derek and Ross. Adopting a stance of silent authority, Rivers kept one hand raised in a non-verbal command for Derek to stay back. "You have violated federal property guidelines," Rivers said, voice calm yet firm enough to be heard clearly by onlookers. "This is your last warning. Leave the restricted area now." Derek's face was a portrait of internal conflict. Anger warred with shock as he grappled with the abrupt realization that he was indeed in trouble. He glanced around, noticing that several security personnel were converging on the scene. Uniformed officers, alerted by the commotion, walked briskly toward the memorial. Some visitors were filming the spectacle, while others shook their heads in dismay. Tension weighed heavily on the atmosphere, as though the entire courtyard had been enveloped in an electric charge. The Marine Memorial itself, a silent tribute to those who gave everything, seemed to loom larger than before, a stark reminder of the solemnity Derek had shattered with his antics. Desperate to maintain some semblance of control, Derek jerked his phone up to his face. Voice quavering slightly, he addressed his livestream audience. Guys, you seeing this?" His bravado was weakened, replaced by a thin veneer of forced confidence. "They're overreacting. I was just messing around. Isn't this public property?" One security officer arrived, stepping up behind Sergeant Rivers. "Sir," the officer spoke, "you've been asked multiple times to leave the restricted zone. You need to comply right now." A flicker of embarrassment passed across Derek's face. Aware that thousands of viewers were still watching, he tried for a final attempt at bravado. "Let me just get one last shot," he insisted, raising the camera toward Lance Corporal Ross again. But the Marine had already resumed his disciplined posture, eyes locked forward, expression impassive. Derek's phone captured an image that told a far more powerful story than any witty remark could convey. A steadfast Marine, unwavering in duty, unshaken by the provocations of an online prankster. At this point, Sergeant Rivers stepped even closer. His voice dropped to a grave register. "If you do not leave immediately, you will be escorted away in handcuffs. Do you understand?" Derek's gaze flickered from Rivers' stern expression to the backup officers flanking him, to the Marine behind them who had returned seamlessly to his post. Realization washed over him. The moment for petty jokes was gone. This was now a matter of legal ramifications and potential arrest. The triumphant spark in his eyes vanished, replaced by a dawning sense of regret. A tense silence followed. A few spectators began to clap. Whether it was support for the Marines or relief that the ordeal might soon end was hard to tell. Derek swallowed hard, the sound amplified by the hush. The security officers took a half-step closer, ready to intervene at the slightest sign of further defiance. Sergeant Rivers remained calm, his presence radiating authority. Finally, Derek lowered his camera and looked around at the faces in the crowd. Disappointment, outrage, pity. None of them were cheering him on now. The flush of embarrassment heated his cheeks. He tried to muster a condescending smirk, but it came across as uncertain, almost pleading. All right, he mumbled. I'll go. With that, Derek turned on his heel, stepping back over the rope barrier. The crowd parted to let him pass, but not before a few spectators voiced their disapproval. Some simply shook their heads. Others murmured pointed words. Shameful, disrespect, grow up. Those quiet condemnations landed on Derek like tiny daggers, far more painful than any official reprimand could ever be. Still, he kept his phone pointing at himself, awkwardly filming his retreat as though hoping to spin this fiasco into something comedic. The uncertainty in his eyes suggested he was already second-guessing his choices. His shoulders slumped, the aura of bravado all but dissolved. As Derek made his way toward the main walkway, Sergeant Rivers and Lance Corporal Ross exchanged a quick glance. An unspoken acknowledgement of a tense situation resolved with minimal force. Ross's grip on his rifle never wavered. His posture remained the same, an unbroken symbol of the Marine Corps' steadfast tradition. But internally, Ross felt a wave of relief. He had performed his duty without crossing any ethical lines, preserving the respect owed to the war memorial. The cluster of bystanders gradually dispersed, many with lingering expressions of gratitude toward the Marines. Some quietly approached Sergeant Rivers to say, "Thank you." Others snapped photos of Lance Corporal Ross returning to his silent guard. A subtle yet palpable sense of restored calm began to settle over the memorial grounds. Derek, however, was not entirely finished. Even as he retreated, he couldn't resist turning the camera around to deliver one more statement to his audience. "That was intense, guys," he said, voice shaky but trying to maintain some sort of swagger. "Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll have more insane content soon." He forced a laugh, but it rang hollow in the solemn air. A few stragglers in the crowd watched him depart, expressions ranging from disappointment to disbelief. The final image of Derek's live stream was his own uncertain face, framed by the towering memorial behind him, a monument to real courage and sacrifice, a stark contrast to the empty spectacle he had attempted to create. As Derek Blake walked away from the memorial with the camera still recording, his usual swagger had evaporated. The confidence that once fueled his every step was now replaced by hesitation. His live chat, once filled with excited emojis and cheering fans, had turned into a divided battleground. Many viewers called him out for his disrespect, while others simply logged off in disappointment. Within minutes, 2 uniformed police officers intercepted him at the edge of the memorial park. One of them asked calmly, "Are you Derek Blake?" Derek tried to play it cool. "Yeah, but I was just making content. It's not like I hurt anyone." The officers didn't raise their voices. Instead, with practiced professionalism, one replied, "You knowingly entered a restricted area, ignored multiple warnings, and disrupted a military ceremonial post. We'll need to ask you a few questions." They guided him to a nearby bench for a formal ID check. While he wasn't arrested, Derek was informed that his actions had violated park regulations and federal guidelines. A citation would be issued, and he could face legal consequences, especially since the incident had been documented by dozens of witnesses, and by his own live stream. Nearby, the crowd had mostly dispersed, yet many stayed long enough to watch Derek being questioned, quietly relieved to see accountability follow disrespect. One veteran stood silently with arms crossed, nodding once in approval as the officers did their job. Back at the memorial, Lance Corporal Ross had already returned to his original stance, eyes forward, posture flawless, as if the disturbance had never happened. His training had taught him to recover quickly, to restore order not just in appearance, but in spirit. His role was more than symbolic. It was a living example of honor, discipline, and strength under pressure. Sergeant Rivers remained nearby, calmly observing. Though the situation had been tense, it was resolved without unnecessary force. That, too, was a victory. As the sun dipped lower over Arlington, the shadow of the Marine Corps War Memorial stretched long across the grass, untouched by drama, unchanged by spectacle. What remained was the silence of sacrifice and the memory of those who gave everything. Derek eventually left the grounds, citation in hand, his followers divided, his reputation shaken. What he intended as a viral stunt became a cautionary tale about pushing limits in the wrong place, at the wrong time, with the wrong audience. This story reminds us that respect isn't just about rules. It's about values. The men and women in uniform represent more than duty. They carry the weight of generations who stood for something greater than themselves. To mock them is to mock sacrifice. To provoke them is to test the very core of dignity. And those who do rarely walk away unchanged. What would you have done if you were Lance Corporal Ross? Would you have kept your composure or reacted differently? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you were moved by this story, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another real story of discipline, duty, and dignity from Authority Watch.